Shaggy. I am Philalitheia, and I am leaving the Panera for the night. Leaving a few minutes later than I wanted. That's not true. I'm leaving right on time tonight. Yeah. I started to be like, let me make sure I actually grab my phone. Alright, so tonight I'm going to be reading the first book in my collection of the Corpus Hermeticum, titled the Poimandres, the Man Shepherd. And for just a moment, I need to put you in my pocket. It is colder out here than I anticipated. Alright. I have given away the last of my first of 2 packs of cigarettes because I am just that fucking swell of a guy. I had this morning, I had remaining 3 cigarettes as planned, enough for my morning smoke, enough for my smoke during the walk to Christ Table, and enough for my smoke from my library, not my library, from the library, up to Panera. And I gave my last 2 away because I'm a good dude, and I got a pack back at the tent. So we're walking back to the tent. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I've been doing today, because I just can't quit you fuckers. It's kind of what it breaks down to. I keep thinking, all right, I don't need this. I don't need the stress. I don't need the frustration, and I most certainly don't need to prove that I know anything more than anybody else, because it doesn't do me any good. Just constantly pointing out, I know more than you, I know more than you. Nobody likes it, and it doesn't help. So when I get depressed and I just want to give up, I've learned about myself, it's because I'm not learning anything new. I took the last, more than a month. Whenever I started doing the journals at the beginning of November, and I asked myself the question at the beginning of the journal process whether it was even possible to do anything creative over a long period of time and remain consistent at it while also learning new things. Because I don't know if you're like me, but I get inspired very easily when I'm learning new things. I'm like, oh, well, what if you move these parts around, and what ifs? And it's difficult to write like a novel like that. It's almost impossible to write a novel like that, because you're just constantly adding new thematic elements. And so I think the answer is, I don't know. I don't know. After 6 weeks, 2 months, it's been effectively 2 months. I don't know if I could do anything like write a novel and learn at the rate that I like to, but I know I was getting depressed, so I just found something that I didn't know to learn about, and it's been evolutionary biology. I've spent the last week just earballs deep in everything that I can learn about every clade of life on the planet, which is a lot. And then it gets repetitive, and it sort of becomes the same thing over and over, and then I kind of tune out because I'm not really learning anything anymore, and I feel bolstered because it's like, I haven't mastered a thing. I found a new thing that I could take another lifetime to master if I really wanted to. And while doing that, I've decided I have a creative thing that I might do. I've been working since 2012, give or take, with a discorporate entity that was never known as Robert Longshore, but insists on going by that name. And he wants me to write his memoirs, and fuck, I've been working on it for, it's almost 13 years now. And I might just put these lives on, put the red light on in my tent, and just do it. Because I have more ambition than actual skill. And what I want to do with it is something that nobody's ever attempted with an audio-visual medium before. So we're going to do something like it tonight when I get back to the tent and we do the Poimandres, because the Poimandres is very much where all this came from for me. Anyway, it's my favorite book. It's split into two books or whatever, two parts. And when I was managing that gas station, I bicycled to work. When I did that, I used to time my bicycle ride so that I could listen to the Man Shepherd half. The first part's called the Man Shepherd, and I think the second part is it's called a dialogue between Hermes Trismegistus and Asclepius. And I used to listen to the Man Shepherd dialogue between the nameless author and the Christ consciousness. And I'm convinced this book was written about 200 years, maybe even 300 years before Jesus. So I'll get into it eventually someday. But I'm going to make an effort. Actually, I'm not going to make an effort. I'm going to succeed at it. I'm not going to give context as I read this. I'm just going to read it, and then I'm going to read it again and give context someday in the future. Almost home. Almost home. I call it home. Oop. I call it home. Oop. I am being followed by someone, so I'm just going to keep walking. We're going to see what this is about. They might want to talk to me. Nope. It's a dirty old truck. See if he's going to stop and invite a conversation, or if I'm just a curiosity to him. Sorry about that. I don't remember what I was talking about now. That shit spooks me out. People really don't have any reason to be back here. I don't have a good reason to be back here. Me pulled up behind one of these stores and stopped. And you know what? I actually was going to go to Dollar General tonight and get new socks anyway. I got a Christmas stimulus of a few bucks. I don't want to deal with this tonight. There, he's going to keep moving. I'm just walking real slow because I don't have anywhere to be. And so I was thinking about Rob. And I think Rob is an interesting guy, but I would think Rob is an interesting guy, right? Like I said, I get inspired very easily. And Rob is kind of everything that I knew and everything I thought about the world circa 2012 wrapped up in one character. He's, if I can get him really going, oh, there's like a whole shitload of people over there. I don't want to walk all the way. I'm just going to pretend like I'm walking home, or walking the opposite direction to not draw attention to myself. And then I'm going to disappear down this hill. Anyway, I was really into alternate history, the ancient aliens and all that stuff, and I just thought, well, what if God tried again? What if he tried or what if he tried incarnating again? Or what if a different, because see, if you've listened to my reading of the Apocryphon of John, I had understood and kind of worked my way toward, on my own, the cosmogony of the Gnostics. Actually, I'm going to want to turn that around. Maybe I'm good. I'm just going to want my flashlight in a moment. But anyway, I'd kind of worked my way into the cosmogony of the Gnostics before I even found that book, before I'd ever read any of the Gnostic material. And so I was just kind of wondering, like, what if a different God chose to incarnate? So Jesus is explicitly, especially in the Gospel of John, the actual canon Gospel of John, Jesus is explicitly Sophia, the wisdom of God embodied. So very specifically, that goddess embodies as a male super deity. And so I was wondering, well, what if a different kind of God embodied as a male super deity? And so I got to digging around in mythology to see if anybody else had fucked around with this idea, because 2012 would have put me at exactly 25, and 25-year-old me wasn't interested a little bit, not even a little bit, in treading ground someone else had already walked. That might seem familiar, as I tread ground only I and a handful of cops have really ever walked. And so I got to thinking about what kind of guy Rob was, and what his influences are, and what I know about them, and what I'm missing, because I had 2 Audible credits, and so that means 2 books that I need to read. And so what 2 books am I missing from my collection to help me better understand him? And then what free books, especially what free lectures, can I read to fill in the gaps? And the answer comes from Dragon Ball Z, actually. One of the things that I was inspired by before 25 was Goku. Goku's maybe the best character in fiction, in my opinion. But for reasons that would start just absolute fistfights, brawls in the Dragon Ball Z community. And so today, I have been researching ancient China, trying to understand the differences in the evolution of China compared to what I know about the evolution of Central Europe and the Mediterranean basin and surrounding locales. Because one of the other things I don't know about is India, and how it evolved into what it became. I get a vague notion from listening to ancient historians from the area that it has something to do with the Harappan culture, which used to be called the the Indus Valley Civilization. And it doesn't make sense to call them the Indus Valley Civilization because they weren't only found in the Indus Valley. They located in the Indus Valley. And they may have through trade and culture war, they may have inspired everybody, the whole world. Anyway, that's what I did today. I studied China. I was talking about my home. Hi, Josiah. I see you were there, and then you're not there anymore. Okay. So what happens next is I'm going to open my book. I studied China. I wanted to see how far Rob falls from the Goku tree and whether it's even worth writing him at all. All right. That wasn't too bad. 15-minute intro. It's right at 8:15, and I can't remember why I opened this. All right, here we go. Oh, well, thank you for being there, Josiah. It was cool to talk to you a little bit while I got set up. Now, I haven't read... What do we got here? Oh, boy. I haven't read specifically through this copy. I might be making a dick ahead of myself here. We're gonna hope not. I will read to you this proem. So, this is the translation by G.R.S. Mead that I'm going to be reading for you. And I'll read you this proem until I get bored. And then we'll go right into the Poimandres. Because this book means a lot to me, and God put it on my heart to do it. So it becomes the second in my esoteric readings series for your amusement, but really for your enrichment and your education. Give me 1 second, actually. I need is the word you won't like that I need, but I got something over here I gotta get out of my backpack. Especially since I love you, Josiah, but you're not here. I don't have to rush. I don't have to rush. You guys may or may not click back into this. It's not my plan to be rolled up on by the pickup truck while I walk down here, so it wasn't my plan to get myself so distracted. But it is my plan to have a delicious EOD smoke stick. And I'm sorry if you don't like it, don't do it. It is bad for your health. It doesn't make me cool. I'm not doing it to be cool. I'm doing it because I like it. It helps me stay focused. And it is an appetite suppressor. So I'm hungry, but I don't need to eat right now. All right. It was great to talk to you, Josiah. Love you, buddy. Now I move on. Proem. Hermes Trismegistus, that is ancient Greek Hermes Trismegistus, thrice great Hermes, Latin Mercurius Ter Maximus, is the purported author of the Hermetic Corpus, a series of sacred texts that are the basis of Hermeticism. Hermes Trismegistus may be associated with the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian god Thoth. Greeks in the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt recognized the equivalence of Hermes and Thoth through the Interpretatio Graeca. The Greek interpretation, I suppose, is what that means. Consequently, that was what I was about to warn you. I haven't read through this, but I know it's old because I got it for cheap, so it's going to have antiquated language, which is why I'll explain it on my second read, because I'll be explaining every sentence. If I assume that you read on a third grade level, you're not going to be reading this knowingly, and that's fine. Consequently, the two gods were worshipped as one, that is, Thoth and Hermes. In what had been the temple of Thoth in Kamenu, which was known in the Hellenistic period as Hermopolis, Hermes, the Greek god of interpretive communication, was combined with Thoth, the Egyptian god of wisdom. The Egyptian priest and polymath Imhotep had been deified long after his death and therefore assimilated to Thoth in the classical Hellenistic periods. The renowned scribe Amenhotep and a wise man named Teos were co-equal deities of wisdom, science, and medicine, and thus they were placed alongside Imhotep in shrines dedicated to Thoth Hermes during the Ptolemaic kingdom. A Mycenaean Greek reference to a deity or semi-deity called Ti-Ri-Se-Ro-E, Tris Heros, thrice or triple hero, was found on 2 linear B clay tablets at Pylos and could be connected to the greater epithet thrice great, Trismegistos, applied to Hermes Thoth. On the aforementioned PYTN 316 tablet, as well as other linear B tablets found in Pylos, Knossos, and Thebes, there appear the names of the deity Hermes as Maha, but not in any apparent connection with the Tricheros. This interpretation of poorly understood Mycenaean material is disputed, since Hermes Trismegistus is not referenced in any of the copious sources before he emerges in Hellenistic Egypt. Cicero enumerates several deities referred to as Hermes, a fourth Mercury. This is a quote. Fourth Mercury, Hermes, was the son of the Nile, whose name may not be spoken by the Egyptians, end quote, and, quote, the fifth, who is worshipped by the people of Phaeacius and Arcadia, is said to have killed Argus Panoptes, and for this reason to have fled to Egypt, and to have given the Egyptians their laws and alphabet. He it is whom the Egyptians called Tate, end quote. The most likely interpretation of this passage is as 2 variants on the same syncretism of Greek Hermes and Egyptian Thoth, or sometimes other gods. The fourth, where Hermes turns out actually to have been a son of the Nile, i.e. a native god, being viewed from the Egyptian perspective. The fifth, who went from Greece to Egypt, being viewed from the Greek Arcadian perspective. Both of these early references in Cicero, most ancient Trismegistus material is from the early centuries AD, corroborate the view that thrice great Hermes originated in Hellenistic Egypt through syncretism between Greek and Egyptian gods. The Hermetica refer most often to Thoth and Amun. The Hermetic literature among the Egyptians, which was concerned with conjuring spirits and animating statues, and formed the oldest Hellenistic writings on Greco-Babylonian astrology and on the newly developed practice of alchemy. Which is why I'm convinced this was written. Honestly, I'm convinced this was written in the 5th century BCE, but they're going to tell you it was written in the AD period. So maybe I'm wrong. In a parallel tradition, Hermetic philosophy rationalized and systematized religious cult practices and offered the adept a means of personal ascension from the constraints of physical being. This latter tradition has led to the confusion of Hermeticism with Gnosticism, which was developing contemporaneously. As a divine source of wisdom, Hermes Trismegistus was credited with tens of thousands of highly esteemed writings, which were reputed to be of immense antiquity. Clement of Alexandria was under the impression that the Egyptians had 42 sacred writings by Hermes, writings that detailed the training of Egyptian priests. Siegfried Morens has suggested, in Egyptian religion, the reference to Thoth's authorship is based on ancient tradition. The figure 42 probably stems from the number of Egyptian nomes and thus conveys the notion of completeness, end quote. The Neoplatonic writers took up Clement's 42 essential texts. The Hermetica is a category of papyri containing spells and initiatory induction procedures. The dialogue, called the Asclepius, after the Greek god of healing, describes the art of imprisoning the souls of demons or of angels in statues with the help of herbs, gems, and odors, so that the statue could speak and engage in prophecy. And other papyri, there are recipes for constructing such images and animating them, such as when images are to be fashioned hollow so as to enclose a magic name inscribed on gold leaf. A 1,000 years after the rabbinic tradition begins, it will take these ideas and call them the golem. But all of these ideas pre-explain how Jesus can be in Jesus's body without sexual congress. Fowden asserts that the first datable occurrences of the epithet thrice great are in the Legatio of Athenagoras of Athens and in a fragment from Philo of Byblos circa AD 64-141. However, in a later work, Copenhaver reports that this epithet is first found in the minutes of a meeting of the Council of the Ibis cult held in 172 BC near Memphis in Egypt. I'm telling you, I am certain that this was written around then. Hart explains that the epithet is derived from an epithet of Thoth found at the temple of Esna, that is, quote, Thoth the Great, the Great, the Great. The date of Hermes Trismegistus' sojourn in Egypt during his last incarnation is not now known, but it has been fixed at the early days of the oldest dynasties of Egypt, long before the days of Moses. Some authorities regard him as a contemporary of Abraham and claim that Abraham acquired a portion of his mystical knowledge from Hermes himself and the Kybalion. And that is what the Torah seems to be telling us. Because there were two wisdom traditions, two magical wisdom traditions, one in Sumer and one in Egypt. And where does Abraham go? Well, he goes to the Chaldees, which is Sumer, and then he goes to Africa. He goes to Egypt. All right. Now, I have to pee really bad. So I am very sorry. My injury has been acting up today. Give me just a second. Okay. Forgive me for that horrible experience. Many Christian writers, including Lactantius Augustine, Marsilio Ficino, Campanella, and Giovanni Pica della Mirandola, as well as Giordano Bruno, considered Hermes Trismegistus to be a wise pagan prophet who foresaw the coming of Christianity. I'm not alone in these thoughts. I came to them on my own, but people who knew this stuff before me got here first. Of course they did. They believed in the existence of a Prisca Theologica, a single true theology that threads through all religions. So do I. It was given by God to a man in antiquity and passed through a series of prophets, which included Zoroaster and Plato. I told you I was researching China today, and that's what I was looking for. I was looking for the through line of their religion to see if I could trace it to borrowing from the Indo-Europeans or copying them, or that the ideas transmitted actually started in China and transmitted west, and China got a lot of these ideas around the same time. They were developing in Athens, which means that they all got them from the mystery and intellectual tradition of the Abrahamids. I'm not joking. So these ancient people that believed that in this Prisca Theologia, they were right to do so. There is one. By this account, Hermes Trismegistus was either a contemporary of Moses or the third in a line of men named Hermes, i.e. Enoch, Noah, and the Egyptian priest king who is known to us as Hermes Trismegistus on account of being the great priest, philosopher, and king. This last account of how Hermes Trismegistus received that epithet is derived from statements in the Emerald Tablet of Hermes Trismegistus, that he knows the three parts of the wisdom of the whole universe. Another explanation in the Suda, 10th century, is that he was called Trismegistus on account of his praise of the Trinity, saying there is one divine nature in the Trinity. The Hermetica are Egyptian Greek wisdom texts from the 2nd century or earlier. Now they mean 2nd century AD or earlier, which are mostly presented as dialogues in which a teacher, generally identified as Hermes Trismegistus, enlightens a disciple. The texts form the basis of Hermeticism. They discuss the divine, the cosmos, mind, and nature. Some touch upon alchemy, astrology, and related concepts. The term particularly applies to the Corpus Hermeticum, Marsilio Ficino's Latin translation in 14 tracts, of which 8 early printed editions appeared before 1500 and a further 22 by 1641. This collection, which includes Poimandres and some addresses of Hermes to disciples Tat, Ammon, Asclepius, was said to have originated in the school of Ammonius Saccas and to have passed through the keeping of Michael Psellus. It was preserved in 14th century manuscripts. The last 3 tracts in modern editions were translated independently from another manuscript by Ficino's contemporary Ludovico Lazzarelli and first printed in 1507. Extensive quotes of similar material are found in classical authors such as, I don't actually know how to spell this, it's probably Johannes Strobaeus. Parts of the Hermetica appeared in the 2nd century Gnostic library found in Nag Hammadi. That's why I'm telling you I think these predate Christianity, because I read some of this stuff in the Nag Hammadi library collection around 2012. Other works in Syriac, Arabic, Coptic, and other languages may also be termed Hermetica. Another famous tract is the Emerald Tablet, which teaches the doctrine as above, so below. For a long time it was thought that these are themselves remnants of a more extensive literature, part of the syncretic cultural movement that also included the Neoplatonic philosophy of the Greco-Roman mysteries and late Orphic and Pythagorean literature, and influenced Gnostic forms of the Abrahamic religions. However, there are significant differences. The Hermetica are little concerned with Greek mythology or the technical minutiae of metaphysical Neoplatonism. In addition, Neoplatonic philosophers who quote works of Orpheus, Zoroaster, and Pythagoras cite Hermes Trismegistus less often. Still, most of these schools do agree in attributing the creation of the world to a demiurge rather than the supreme being, and in accepting reincarnation. Many Christian intellectuals from all eras have written about Hermeticism, both positive and negative. However, modern scholars find no traces of Christian influences in the texts. Although Christian authors have looked for similarities between Hermeticism and Christian scriptures, scholars remain unconvinced. I am absolutely not unconvinced. I am certain that the gospel writers had read this stuff. While they are difficult to date with precision, the texts of the Corpus were likely redacted between the 1st and 3rd centuries AD. During the Renaissance, these texts were believed to be of ancient Egyptian origin, and even today some readers, translators, and scholars believe them to date from Pharaonic Egypt. Since Plato's Timaeus dwelt upon the great antiquity of the Egyptian teachings upon which the philosopher purported to draw, some scholars are willing to accept that these texts were the source of some Greek ideas. In that line of thinking, it has also been suggested that there are some parallels between Hermetic dialogues and Hellenic dialogues, particularly Plato. Centuries before the discovery of the Nag Hammadi library, and based on archaic translations, classical scholar Isaac Casaubon 1559 to 1614 had argued that some texts, mainly those dealing with philosophy, betrayed too recent a vocabulary. Hellenisms in the language itself point to a Greek-era origin. However, flaws in this dating were discerned by the 17th century scholar Ralph Cudworth, who argued that Casaubon's allegation of forgery could only be applied to 3 of the 17 treatises contained within the Corpus Hermeticum. Moreover, Cudworth noted Casaubon's failure to acknowledge the codification of these treatises as a late formulation of a pre-existing oral tradition. And a question that I have for Casaubon that he can't answer is, what would happen if I were to translate the Bible from Hebrew or from the Greek if I were doing the Septuagint, or from Aramaic if I were doing the Gospels, but I were to do it in entirely modern idiom? Entirely modern idiom. That would seem like I've written something completely unrelated to the original text. If I literally changed, like, if I changed agrarian metaphors to shopping metaphors, for example, you would think that I've completely changed the text. But if the point is to keep the ideas fresh and modern for a young audience, you might want to use Hellenisms. in your translation. According to Cudworth, the text must be viewed as a terminus ad quem and not a quo. Lost Greek texts and many of the surviving Vulgate books contain discussions of alchemy clothed in philosophical metaphor, and one text, the Asclepius, lost in Greek but partially preserved in Latin, contained a bloody prophecy at the end of Roman rule in Egypt and the resurgence of pagan Egyptian power. Thus, it would be fair to assess the Corpus Hermeticum as intellectually eclectic. More recent research, while affirming the late dating in a period of syncretic cultural ferment in Roman Egypt, suggests more continuity with the culture of Pharaonic Egypt than had previously been believed. And we're just going to move on because you don't need any more than that. There are only 4 more paragraphs, but I am impatient. Book 1, Corpus Hermeticum, attributed to Hermes Trismegistus. Title, Poimandres, the Shepherd of Men. 1. I'm not going to read those every time. It chanced, once on a time, my mind was meditating on the things that are. My thought was raised to a great height, the senses of my body being held back, just as men are who are weighed down with sleep after a fill of food or from fatigue of body. Methought a being more than vast, in size beyond all bounds, called out my name and saith, "What wouldst thou hear and see? What hast thou in mind to learn and know?" And I do say, "Who art thou?" He saith, "I am man-shepherd, mind of all masterhood. I know what thou desirest, and I'm with thee everywhere." I reply, "I long to learn the things that are and comprehend their nature and know God. This is," I said, "what I desire to hear." He answered back to me, "Hold in thy mind all thou wouldst know, and I will teach thee." E'en with these words his aspect changed, and straightway in the twinkling of an eye all things were opened to me, and I see a vision limitless, all things turned into light, sweet, joyous light, and I became transported as I gazed. But in a little while darkness came settling down on part of it, awesome and gloomy, coiling in sinuous folds, so that methought it like unto a snake. And then the darkness changed into some sort of moist nature, tossed about beyond all power of words, belching out smoke as from fire, and groaning forth a wailing sound that beggars all description. After that an outcry, inarticulate, came forth from it, as though it were a voice of fire. Thereon, out of the light, a holy word descended on that nature, and upwards to the height from the moist nature leaped forth pure fire. Light was it, swift and active too. The air, too, being light, followed after the fire. From out the earth and water, rising up to fire so that it seemed to hang therewith. But earth and water stayed so mingled each with other, that earth from water no one could discern. Yet were they moved to hear by reason of that spirit word pervading them. Then saith to me man-shepherd, "Didst understand this vision, what it means?" "Nay, that shall I know," I said. "That light," he said, "am I, thy God, mind, prior to moist nature which appeared from darkness. The light word that appeared from mind is Son of God." "What then?" say I. "Know that what sees in thee and hears is the Lord's word, but mind is Father God. Not separate are they the one from other, just in their union. Rather is it life consists." "Thanks be to thee," I said. "So understand the light," he answered, "and make friends with it." And speaking thus, he gazed for long into my eyes, so that I trembled at the look of him. But when he raised his head, I see in mine the light, but now in powers no man can number, in cosmos 3 grown beyond all bounds, and that the fire was compassed round about by a most mighty power, and now, subdued, had come unto a stand. And when I saw these things, I understood by reason of man-shepherd's word. But as I was in great astonishment, he saith to me again, "Thou didst behold in mind the archetypical form, whose being is before beginning without end. Thus spake to me man-shepherd. And I say, whence then have nature's elements their being? To this he answer gives, from will of God. Nature received the word, and gazing on the cosmos beautiful did copy it, making herself into a cosmos, by means of her own elements, and by the births of souls. And God the mind being male and female both, as light and life subsisting, brought forth another mind to give things form, who, God as he was of fire and spirit, formed 7 rulers who enclose the cosmos that the sense perceives, men call their ruling fate. Straightway from out the downward elements God's reason, Logos, leaped up to nature's pure formation and was atoned, that is, at oned with the formative mind, for it was coessential with it, and nature's downward elements were thus left reasonless, so as to be pure matter. Then the formative mind, at one with reason, he who surrounds the spheres and spins them with his whirl, set turning his formations, and let them turn from a beginning boundless unto an endless end. For that the circulation of these spheres begins where it doth end, as mind doth will. And from the downward elements nature brought forth lives reasonless, for he did not extend the reason. The air brought forth things winged, the water things that swim, and earth and water one from another parted, as mind willed. And from her bosom earth produced what lives she had, 4-footed things and reptiles, beast, wild, and tame. But all Father Mind, being life and light, did bring forth man, co-equal to himself, with whom he fell in love, as being his own child, for he was beautiful beyond compare, the image of his sire. In very truth, God fell in love with his own form, and on him did bestow all of his own formations. And when he gazed upon what the informer had created in the Father, man too wished to inform, and so assent was given him by the Father, changing his state to the formative sphere, and that he was to have his whole authority. He gazed upon his brother's creatures. They fell in love with him, and gave him each a share of his own ordering. And after that he had well learned their essence, and had become a sharer in their nature, he had a mind to break right through the boundary of their spheres, and to subdue the might of that which pressed upon the fire. So he who hath the whole authority o'er all the mortals in the cosmos, and o'er its lives irrational, bent his face downwards through the harmony, breaking right through its strength, and showed to downward nature God's fair form. And when she saw that form of beauty which can never satiate, and him who now possessed within himself each single energy of all 7, rulers as well as God's own form, she smiled with love. For 'twas as though she'd seen the image of man's fairest form upon her water, his shadow on her earth. He in his turn, beholding the form like to himself existing in her water, loved it, and willed to live in it, and with the will came act, and so he vivified the form devoid of reason. The nature took the object of her love and wound herself completely round him, and they were intermingled, for they were lovers. And this is why beyond all creatures on the earth man is twofold, mortal because of body, but because of the essential man, immortal. Though deathless and possessed of sway o'er all, yet doth he suffer as a mortal doth, subject to fate. Thus, though above the harmony, within the harmony he hath become a slave, though male-female, as from a father, male-female. And though he's sleepless, from a sleepless sire, yet he is overcome by sleep. Thereon, I say, teach on, O mind of me, for I myself as well am amorous of the word. The shepherd said, this is the mystery kept hid until this day. Nature embraced by man brought forth a wonder, oh, so wonderful. For, as he had the nature of the concord of the 7, who, as I said to thee, were made of fire and spirit, nature delayed not, but immediately brought forth 7 men, in correspondence with the natures of the 7, male, female, and moving in the air. Thereon I said, O shepherd, for now I'm filled with great desire and long to hear, do not run off. I'm going to wait for this car to pass. The shepherd said, keep silent, for not as yet have I unrolled for thee the first discourse. Lo, I am still, I said. In such wise, then, as I have said, the generation of these 7 came to pass. Earth was as woman, her water filled with longing. Ripeness she took from fire, spirit from ether. Nature thus brought forth frames to suit the form of man. And man from life and light changed into soul and mind, from life to soul, from light to mind. And thus continued all the sense world's parts, until the period of their end and new beginnings. Now listen to the rest of the discourse, which thou dost long to hear. The period being ended, the bond that bound them all was loosened by God's will. For all the animals being male, female, at the same time with man were loosed apart. Some became partly male, some in like fashion partly female, and straightway God spake by his holy word. Increase ye in increasing, and multiply in multitude, ye creatures and creations all. And man that hath mind in him, let him learn to know that he himself is deathless, and that the cause of death is love, though love is all. When he said this, his forethought did by means of fate and harmony effect their couplings, and their generations founded. And so all things were multiplied according to their kind. And he who thus hath learned to know himself hath reached that good which doth transcend abundance. But he, through a love that leads astray, expends his love upon his body. He stays in darkness, wandering and suffering through his senses, things of death. What is the so great fault, said I, the ignorant commit, that they should be deprived of deathlessness? Thou seemst, he said, O thou, not to have given heed to what thou heardest. Did not I bid thee think? Yea, do I think, and I remember, and therefore give thee thanks. If thou didst think thereon, said he, tell me, why did they merit death who are in death? It is because the gloomy darkness is the root and base of the material frame. From it came the moist nature, and from this 3 the body and the sense world was composed. And from this body death doth the water drain. Right was thy thought, O thou, but how doth he who knows himself go unto him, as God's word hath declared? And I reply, the Father of the universals doth consist of light and life, and from him man was born. Thou sayest well, thus speaking, light and life is Father God, and from him man was born. If then thou learnest that thou art thyself of light and life, and that thou only happenest to be out of them, thou shalt return again to life. Thus did man-shepherd speak. But tell me further, mind of me, I cried, how shall I come to life again? For God doth say, the man who hath mind in him, let him learn to know that he himself is deathless. Have not all men then mind? Thou sayest well, O thou, thus speaking, I, mind, myself am present with holy men and good, the pure and merciful, men who live piously. To such my presence doth become an aid, and straightway they gain gnosis of all things, and win the Father's love by their pure lives, and give him thanks, invoking on him blessings, and chanting hymns, intent on him with ardent love. And ere they give the body up unto its proper death, they turn them with disgust from its sensations, from knowledge of what things they operate. Nay, it is I, the mind, that will not let the operations which befall the body work to their natural end. For being doorkeeper, I'll close up all the entrances, and cut the mental actions off which base and evil energies induce. But to the mindless ones, the wicked and depraved, the envious and covetous, and those who murder, do, and love impiety, I am far off, yielding my place to the avenging daimon, who, sharpening the fire, tormenteth him, and addeth fire to fire upon him, and rusheth on him through his senses, thus rendering him the readier for transgressions of the law, so that he meets with great torment. Nor doth he ever cease to have desire for appetites inordinate, insatiately striving in the dark. Well hast thou taught me all as I desired, O mind, and now pray tell me further of the nature of the way above, as now it is for me. To this man shepherd said,
When thy material body is to be dissolved, first thou surrenderest the body by itself unto the work of change, and thus the form thou hadst doth vanish, and thou surrenderest thy way of life, void of its energy, unto the daimon. The body's senses next pass back into their senses, becoming separate, and resurrect as energies, and passion and desire withdraw unto that nature which is void of reason. And thus it is that man doth speed his way thereafter upwards through the harmony. To the first zone he gives the energy of growth and waning, unto the second zone device of evils, now de-energized, unto the third the guile of the desires de-energized, unto the fourth his domineering arrogance, also de-energized, unto the fifth unholy daring, and the rashness of audacity, de-energized, unto the sixth striving for wealth by evil means, deprived of its aggrandizement, and to the seventh zone, snaring falsehood, de-energized. And then, with all the energizings of the harmony stripped from him, clothed in his proper power, he cometh to that nature which belongs unto the eighth, and there with those that are hymneth the Father. They who are there welcome his coming there with joy, and he, made like to them that sojourn there, doth further hear the powers who are above the nature that belongs unto the eighth, singing their songs of praise to God in language of their own. I'm going to cut in right here. If you ever hear people talking to you about how the seventh heaven is the highest heaven, they're wrong. The eighth heaven is the highest heaven. The eighth heaven is nirvana. And then they, in a band, go to the Father home of their own selves. They make surrender of themselves to powers, and thus, becoming powers, they are in God. This the good, and for those who have gained gnosis, to be made one with God. Why shouldst thou then delay? Must it not be, since thou hast all received, that thou shouldst to the worthy point the way, in order that through thee the race of mortal kind may be thy God? Be saved, may by thy God be saved. This, when he'd said, man's shepherd mingled with the powers. But I, with thanks and blessings unto the Father of the universal powers, was freed, full of the power he had poured into me, and full of what he taught me of the nature of the all and of the loftiest vision. And I began to preach to men the beauty of devotion and of gnosis. O ye people, earth-bound folk, ye who have given yourselves to drunkenness and sleep and ignorance of God, be sober now. Cease from your surfeit. Cease to be glamored by irrational sleep. And when they heard, they came with one accord, whereon I say, ye earth-born folk, why have ye given up yourselves to death? While yet ye have the power of sharing deathlessness. Repent, O ye who walk with error arm in arm, and make of ignorance the sharer of your board. Get ye from out the light of darkness, and take your part in deathlessness. Forsake destruction. And some of them with jest upon their lips I departed from me, abandoning themselves unto the way of death. Others entreated to be taught, casting themselves before my feet. But I made them arise, and I became a leader of the race too, towards home, teaching the words, how and in what way they shall be saved. I sowed in them the words of wisdom. 3. Of deathless waters, that's a verse count. Of deathless waters were they given to drink. And when even was some, and when even, that is evening, was come, and all sun's beams began to set, I bade them all give thanks to God. And when they had brought to an end the giving of their thanks, each man returned to his own resting place. But I recorded in my heart man's shepherd's benefaction, and with my every hope fulfilled more than rejoiced. For body's sleep became the soul's awakening, and closing of the eyes true vision. Pregnant with good my silence, and the utterance of my word, begetting of good things. All this befell me from my mind, that is, man shepherd, word of all masterhood, by whom being God inspired I came unto the plain of truth, Wherefore, with all my soul and strength, thanksgiving give I unto Father God. Holy art thou, O God, the universal's Father. Holy art thou, O God, whose will perfects itself by means of its own powers. Holy art thou, O God, who willeth to be known, and art known by thine own. Holy art thou, who didst by word make to consist the things that are. Holy art thou, of whom all nature hath been made an image. Holy art thou, whose form nature hath never made. Holy art thou, more powerful than all power. Holy art thou, transcending all preeminence. Holy art thou, thou better than all praise. Accept my reason's offerings pure, from soul and heart, for I stretched up to thee. O thou unutterable, unspeakable, whose name naught but the silence can express, give ear to me who pray that I may ne'er of gnosis fail, gnosis, which is our common being's nature, and fill me with thy power and with this grace of thine, that I may give the light to those in ignorance of the race, my brethren and thy sons. For this cause I believe and I bear witness. I go to life and light. Blessed art thou, O Father. Thy man would wholly be as thou art holy, e'en as thou gavest him thy full authority to be. End. And I have to pee again. All right. Well, that was awesome for me. That is my favorite book, the Poimandres. That is my pet favorite intellectual tradition, the esoteric. I am very possessive, territorial of specifically the esoterica, not just this collection of books, but the teachings and claims made about the teachings, the actual written words, the actual methods that are used to reach God, and what gnosis is. We can talk about that later. I, again, appreciate Josiah if you end up watching this. What I've told myself in my head is that you've gone to watch the rest of the Apocryphon of John. So these two things are a connected experience for you. But it's entirely possible that I said something that offended you, so you fucked off. It's also entirely possible you were driving that truck. So, you know, anything's possible is kind of the point there, I guess. I'm gonna do a commentary on both of these, explaining what's going on eventually. Because I do anticipate, I do expect to make a living at being myself and learning and taking what I learn and being inspired by it. I have a Patreon. I have a Buy Me a Coffee that I really, really prefer you not use. I have
Cash App, Venmo, PayPal. I am homeless. Believe or don't, but I live down here. Lived down here for 3 months now. Haven't hurt anybody. Not yet. Haven't wanted to hurt anybody in a long time. I documented that day. You can find it. I have this weird feeling that because I've been reading, somebody's gonna bother me now. It's not really fair when I'm the one kind of bothering them if my reading is bothering them. My plan is to read these books like this for free, make it available to you for free as a conversation like this, just to hang out with me in my tent while I read books that are really important to me and my journey, in an effort to articulate to you how I can make claims like that I'm Bodhisattva or I'm Christ. You're not allowed to make that claim. But you're not allowed to make that claim in modernity, because we have 2,000 years of tradition telling you not to make that claim. More than 2,000 years tradition, but that tradition came from a place of people making that claim and starting wars over it. I'm not trying to start a war. I don't want to be king of anywhere. That's what the Christ is. He's a king. He's the king, philosopher, priest. And actually, because the evolution to that is more recent in China than in the Middle East, you could actually see how it works the same way. So I began this by talking about how I've been learning about evolutionary biology. And so I've been thinking about history like an evolutionary biologist, because human history is our epigenetic evolution. I saw a YouTube short today about somebody was complaining that we're the only animals that don't follow the natural order of things. But 500 years before Jesus, all of the literate societies on the planet had decided that, in fact, the way they were then was the natural order of things, and that it should remain the way it was forever. That's why 50 years later, Athens didn't like democracy anymore. The Warring States period is contiguous with Plato. It starts about 25 years before Plato and ends about the time that the Torah is being written. So, Confucius, Lao Tzu, Mao Tzu, they influenced your Abrahamic traditions, folks. But don't worry, your Abrahamic traditions tried to influence them back. Through Lao Tzu.
Tried. Failed. Try as hard as you can. Ideas don't go away. They just don't go away. Especially when they work. And see, the thing about the esoteric tradition is it works. You know how I know it works? Because it set the foundation for psychology. That's how I know it works. Early philosophers didn't just sell themselves as teachers. They sold themselves as spiritual healers. And because what we have is folklore and hyperbole, we think that spiritual healers were going around curing actual wounds, actual illnesses. And they weren't. They were claiming to, because if the effectively Native American traditions of shamanism still existed among the steppe peoples, their medicine men did some wacky shit. So maybe someday I'll read Joseph Campbell for you, where he lays out the wacky shit. But you can find people talking about the wacky shit, because the wacky shit humans do makes for good documentary, makes for good video. It's easy to make fun of from a postmodern perspective. Why would people do rain dances, for example? Why would people self-harm, self-flagellate? Why would they do these things? Well, if it worked once, and Santa Claus rules, there's something to it. Something to it. And so if you take the time, I'm winding up to be done. I think I've said everything I want to say today. I did some writing today. I'm back at the journal. Back at the journal on Patreon. So if you want to know what I'm writing about, if you want to know what my research is like in real time, if you want to know what I'm thinking about in real time on a day-to-day basis, that's what the Patreon is for. But the way other people do this is they offer the experience that I'm offering here. I can't do edited 20-minute just little done, get all my mistakes. I don't have the money to justify the hard drive space on my phone, and I don't have a team of people. I don't have an editor. I can't afford one. That's what the Patreon is for. My short-term goals are not to escape this tent. There's some talk around town that I'm journaling, and so people have been talking themselves into, well, if I'm not the only person buying, I'll buy two about my work, and they think they're gonna elevate me out of this tent by doing that, and they could. Depends on how much they want to give me, how much they can actually drum up, and how quickly. If I can get $1,000 a month, I'll get an apartment. As soon as I know that, it's basically the month after, when I've got $2,000 in the bank, I'll go and get an apartment. No problem. And then I'll use that to grow to the next thing, which is getting all the things I just talked about: the hard drive space, the desktop, the all the things to be professional, a setup where you're not in my tent with me. You don't have to look at darkness for most of the video. All of those things come with Patreon subs. And so the next thing I'm going to do to make Patreon subs worth your time is once I have a few who are there specifically for this product that I'm doing, the reading and the expanded commentary, from the perspective not of a person who has a curiosity or a passing interest in this stuff, but someone who has lived it, practiced it, made it his actual worldview for the better part of 25 years. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do the expanded commentaries as paywall blocked lives that will go up as unlisted, and the link will be made available to paid members at any level, or I will sell them for $15 a piece. That's too cheap. That's what I'm gonna do. If you're into what I'm doing, if you like it, even if you just have a bourgeoisie kind of guilt that your life is whatever your life is and my life is whatever you think my life is, even if it's just you want to help a guy who's poor, that's what I'm going to do. And as I work on Rob, I'm going to do him the same way. I'm going to put him behind a paywall. You know, there's a thing that the pros say, you know, we want to keep doing this, and the Patreon makes it possible for us to experiment. Well, everything I'm doing is experimenting right now. So every like, every comment, even the negative ones, they help. Even when they don't, they help. So thank you for watching this, future audience. I am Shaggy. I am Philalitheia. And this has been a reading of the first book of the Corpus Hermeticum, the Poimandres, Shepherd of Men. Thank you. Until next time, take care of yourselves. I can't.